Bombshell emails sent by Jeffrey Epstein have been released for the first time, with new information that refers to Donald Trump. Or is it really new information? Or, with great respect, are you going to be misled by some of the headlines and articles that you're going to read and be left with the impression that Donald Trump was somehow involved in the wrongdoing? Because the email referred to, which I'll show you in a minute, says that Donald Trump spent hours with one of the victims at Epstein's home. Now, with great respect, I'm going to explain to you in this video why this is not new information, and it's frankly, I think, irresponsible not to make this absolutely clear from the headline that this does not say what it might sound like at first blush. So if you would like an analytical legal analysis of the stories that you read in the media, please do subscribe to the channel, because I suspect most of the news outlets are going to jump on this like it's a big bombshell, attack Donald Trump. The timing is impeccable with what's going on at the moment with the BBC case and so on. So please do subscribe and I'd be very grateful. Let me give you an example. This is the Mirror here. Jeffrey Epstein's emails claim Trump knew about the girls and spent hours at his home. And then goes on to say that he spent hours with one of this little bit highlighted down here. Jeffrey Epstein claimed Donald Trump knew about the girls and had spent hours at the disgraced financier's home with one of the victims. Emails released today claimed. So what's this all about, and why is it not quite, even from that, is not quite as straightforward as it seems? Well, the Democrat House Oversight Committee has decided to publish a few email exchanges, which obviously, at first blush, put Donald Trump in a bad light. So the Republicans therefore released a lot of other stuff and confirmed who this victim is. But again, it's not quite as straightforward. Here's the email that they all refer to. And it says as follows. It says, from Jeffrey Epstein, I want you to realize that the dog that hasn't barked is Trump. Victim spent hours at my house with him. He has never once been mentioned. Police chief, etc. I'm 75% there. So the key bit there, obviously, is that it says a victim spent several hours with Donald Trump at Epstein's house, giving you the distinct impression that Donald Trump was up to no good. And if that's all you knew about it, that might be the impression you're left with. Much like the false impression that the BBC gave that he incited violence at Capitol Hill, which he did not. He's rejected their apology, by the way. More about that a little bit later. But moving back to this, the White House responded. They said the victim in this chain of emails was Virginia Giuffre. Now, this is not new information because this already went to court in 2015. More about that in just a second. The statement from the White House says as follows. The Democrats selectively leaked emails to the liberal media to create a fake narrative to smear President Trump. The unnamed victim referenced in these emails is the late Virginia Giuffre, who repeatedly said President Trump was not involved in any wrongdoing whatsoever and couldn't have been friendlier to her in their limited interactions. Now, I can show you evidence of that as well. This is the video deposition of Virginia Giuffre, and this is in the documents of 2016, November 2016. And this is her, the bit highlighted is her correcting another statement. And then she made very clear in this highlighted bit here. Now, just so that you understand, she's correcting a statement, a record of interview that she'd given. And she made clear as follows. He, Donald Trump, didn't partake in any sex with us. But then she was correcting this bit where it says, but he flirted with me. She was correcting this and she said the first bit was true, that he didn't have any sex with him. But then she's correcting this bit and says it's not true that he flirted with me. Donald Trump never flirted with me. She was absolutely clear. And throughout this document, she makes numerous references that he did not do anything of the sort. So if you just read this email by itself, you'd be left with the impression that a victim was with Donald Trump at Epstein's house, which of course is a bit of a false narrative. Thus has been corrected by the White House by revealing that the redacted name is Virginia Giuffre, and this is not new information. This goes right back to 2015 and the email goes back to 2011. And this shows just how easily you can be misled by what you see, what you read, and what you hear. And it's critically important that you actually read further down in the article or you don't read it at all. Because if you read the headline and the top bit, you might be left with a distinctly false and very damaging impression of somebody, unless you read the full thing, as you may not do in some of the articles. You may be left with the wrong impression. For example, going back to this article from the Mirror here, you may read the headline, Jeffrey Epstein's emails claim Trump knew about the girls and spent hours at his home. And then you might read the bit further down, Jeffrey Epstein claims that he knew about the girls and spent hours at the disgraced financier's home with one of the victims. Emails released today claimed, it says. So if you only read that bit, you'd be left with one impression. Now, in a moment, another example of the BBC selectively editing President Trump's speeches to leave you with a false impression, not just the Panorama programme. Back to that in a minute. As an aside, many of you know I've had a number of problems with mobile phone contracts in the last year or two, the most ridiculous of which was when my son went to France and his phone wouldn't work, despite roaming apparently being activated. But in order to properly activate it, they insisted on sending a PIN to the phone, which we couldn't do because he was already in France, and so that took a lot of sorting out. So I didn't want that to happen again, so I looked for a company to provide mobile SIM access when traveling around, and I found Saley, who now sponsors my channel. They provide an app which has an eSIM, so no bit of card that arrives in the post, you just activate an eSIM on your device. You buy a plan for your chosen destination, and it activates seamlessly on arrival. It gives you fast internet access wherever you are in the world, and because it's brought to you by NordVPN, it also provides you with security features such as scanning networks and websites for malicious activity, and keeps you safe while you're traveling around. Especially if you're in an unknown country, unknown coffee shop, the security element is absolutely essential. And obviously, as they sponsor my channel here, you get a 15% off any plan you choose to buy. Just use the code BlackBeltBarrister at the checkout. You don't need to pay anything straight away. You can download the app so it's ready for when you travel. Then you can buy a plan when you're ready to travel. Use my code BlackBeltBarrister for 15% discount, and the plan will activate seamlessly when you arrive, ensuring that you get seamless access to the internet, and it keeps you safe from malicious websites. So thank you to Saley for making this easy and for providing you a discount. So back to the BBC and its twisting and changing of the meaning of President Trump's speech. I talked to you in the previous video about the Panorama edit, which was as follows. Just to remind you of this, the Panorama version versus the original version. Take a listen to this first of all.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
So the difference was clear, and the chair of the BBC admitted in writing that it gave the false impression that President Trump had incited riots. And then there was questions over whether it was deliberate, whether it was a simple mistake, whether it was an editorial judgment, decision, or whatever. But that's not the only example. You've probably now heard about the News Night version as well. Have a listen to this one.
We're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
And so again, a very different version of the same speech. Now, once might be a mistake, but twice, both giving the wrong impression that he incited violence, that's highly questionable. Now, a lot of people are debating whether or not he's going to be successful in this case or not, but with some of the admissions made by the BBC already, that's fairly damning in my view. And it doesn't end there either, and it doesn't end with President Trump. They've also done this with Rupert Lowe MP, literally in the last couple of days. Take a look at this post here, which incorrectly quotes Rupert Lowe, which has been replaced, but I'll come back to the replacement in a moment. They said, Independent MP Rupert Lowe asks if the PM would put the death penalty for overseas and foreign criminals to the public in a referendum. Keir Starmer says that's not the answer, etc. Rupert Lowe responds and calls them out. He said, the BBC posted an entirely false quote, and this is their response. You lied, BBC Politics, he says. Now, the BBC did post again. This is the updated version, the corrected version. They said, Independent MP Rupert Lowe asks if reintroduction of the death penalty for both foreign and domestic criminals should be put to the British people in a legally binding referendum. Reintroducing the death penalty is not the answer, the PM says. And then they said underneath, this post corrects an earlier post which incorrectly quoted Rupert Lowe. This correction supersedes the previous clarification. We apologise to Mr. Lowe for the error. Rupert Lowe says, with today's BBC apology to me, impressively, that's now 3 apologies and corrections over the disgraceful coverage of me in just 4 months. 3 times they've had to admit they got it wrong. Always, curiously, in the same direction. Funny that, isn't it, he says. A clear pattern. When was the last time you saw the BBC make a mistake that unfairly boosted someone on the other side of politics? Doesn't happen. He says, let's see what Trump can extract from them. I wish him well. I hope he goes for $1 billion. Now, there's people for and against the BBC. This video is not an attack the BBC video, but there is a pattern of them making mistakes and consistent mistakes in the wrong direction. The wrong direction being obviously against certain people. Now, the false edits, in my view, gave you the false impression that President Trump incited the riots at Capitol Hill, both in the Panorama program and in the Newsnight version, both of which lead you to the same conclusion, reasonably, in my view, and both of which are wrong. And in this case, just to spell it out, the first version of the BBC's post here with Rupert Lowe is giving you the impression that he's only asking for the death penalty for overseas and foreign criminals, rather than everybody. When you see what he actually said here, he asked about the reintroduction of the death penalty for both foreign and domestic criminals, whether that should be put to the public in a legally binding referendum. Now, there's an interesting quirk there as well, because public referendums are not legally binding, just like Brexit was not legally binding, but we went with it anyway. I don't think it was done very well, and for what it's worth, I voted Remain. So whether that's of any interest to you, I'm not sure, but I don't think we did Brexit properly. I think we could have done it properly, but nonetheless, that's how I voted. But finally, and before I let you go, I have to comment on this one here from James McMurdoch MP, where he says that an Amazon delivery driver let himself into his home, and the police say that it's a civil matter and nothing they can do. Now, I'll show you this little snippet here, and I'll tell you what I think, because for what it's worth, I don't agree. Watch this. Rings the bell.
Whoa!
So clearly trying to let himself in. For what purpose? Now, I'll come back to that in a minute. Now, it's lucky that James was there and it wasn't a child or somebody opening the door. It's lucky that nothing worse happened, and it's lucky that this is all that it was. But nonetheless, it was reported to the police. Now, James says here that he doesn't know what this guy's intentions were, and that's exactly the point. He said he contacted the police, and the police said that this is a civil matter, there's nothing we can do. He said a senior officer on shift confirmed it. So let's be absolutely honest with the public, James says. Under current law, if a stranger walks into your house, the police may not attend. At a time when delivery companies are hiring thousands of temporary drivers, who's turning up at the doors? What's the level of risk, etc.? Now, this is very straightforward. The police, in my view, should have looked into this and at the very least arrested and questioned him on suspicion of burglary, which is entering a premises without permission, which means you're there as a trespasser, with the intention to commit certain offences, which include stealing something or attempting to steal something, or causing someone serious harm or damage, and so on. So, at the very, very least, in my view, they should have arrested him and questioned him on suspicion of burglary. Because, who knows, maybe, some of the answers come out there may have led to some prosecution against him. But how would they know unless they sat down and actually questioned the guy? At the very least, in my view, they should have questioned him for it. And if they don't do that, how can we have confidence, particularly as this is a member of parliament? So in my view, they absolutely should be following this up. They should be questioning the guy on suspicion of burglary. That is the very least that we should expect. And if not, I think it's a symptom of underfunding and at worst, lazy policing. But I'd like to think that it's not. I'd like to think that it's just underfunded. But let me know what you think in the comments below about any of the above. And if you did think anything different about President Trump, and that's now been corrected, let me know that in the comments as well. I'd be very interested if any of this changes any preconceptions that you had or ideas and confirmations that you had, false confirmations from what you've seen in the media. I'd be very interested. So with that, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.